Hi, I'm Bill Arnold. Thank you for listening to this podcast. There are many more podcasts available at myfaithradio.com. Your support makes this possible. Thank you.
Well, I've heard if you want to make a point, you have to repeat it 3 times. Repeat it 3 times. Repeat it 3 times.
Oh, don't you know, it's the Bill Arnold Show. It's Bill.
And a warm welcome to the Bill Arnold Show. I've been talking about this off and on for, 4 or 5 months because it seems to come up often where we have challenging relationships because we maybe are not vulnerable enough, or we just can't really get to a place of intimacy when it comes to emotions or prayer life. There's enough things going on that keep us busy and distracted. And maybe we're just more comfortable avoiding certain levels of emotional intimacy in our important relationships. That's our topic today with Dr. Bob Moeller. You can learn more about Bob at forkeepsministries.com. That's FORKEEP ministries.com, forkeepsministries.com. Bob's not only a pastor, but a host of a nationally broadcast weekly television show called Marriage for Better for Worse. He's got a lot of other credentials, but I want to get to the material. Bob, welcome.
Thanks so much, Bill. It's great to be back.
Yeah. So I would love to kind of do a profile, if you wouldn't mind, on the kinds of people that are more inclined to avoid emotional intimacy.
Well, there was a study done by 2 New York researchers. It was actually done on singles, but it applies to everyone. And what they studied was the way in which people are willing to bond or become secure in relationships, and tried to study the differences between those who welcome close relationships and those who try and avoid them. Mm-hmm. And they came up with their study that in the general population, and I have no reason to believe this might not be true in the church as well, that there were 3 groups. 25% would be defined as anxious about relationships. They're always nervous about what the status of a relationship is. Are they liked? Are they disliked? Do people want them, not want them? If they're in a dating relationship, does he like me? Is this going somewhere? Does she have an interest? And they're always anxious. They're always sort of, checking the, to use probably a more current term, they're always checking their phone, so to speak, to see where they stand. About 25% of adults are anxious. Another 25% are what they call avoidant. And rather than being anxious about a relationship, they avoid one. They shy away from emotionally connected relationships. Not always at first. They may actually pursue a relationship. Let's talk about a dating relationship or whatever. Someone may actually pursue the other person, and the other person may eventually respond. But then when it starts to become a little deeper, where that requires a higher level of vulnerability or transparency, they back away. They shut it down. They don't even understand why they do it, but they just ghost the other person. They quit responding to texts, emails. They don't call them. They just sort of disappear, leaving the other person, somewhat baffled. I thought that you were interested, and now you've just disappeared. Well, that's because something inside them clicks on when relationships begin to get too close. They find a reason to get out, to sabotage it, to end it in some way. And then the third group, which is about 50% of adults, are secure. They welcome close and lasting emotional relationships with others. They find great joy. They find great meaning in developing existing relationships and going deeper, as well as developing new ones. I have a friend who is obviously a very secure person because he pursues, in a positive way, getting to know people and enjoying them. Recently, he gave some tickets to my adult daughter and son-in-law to go to a theme park where his wife works, and my daughter-in-law was out of town, and she stopped by with her husband, and he not only met them at the door, he then went to their car to meet their in-laws and the other people who had come with them. In other words, he didn't have to do it. He could have left an envelope taped on the floor, on the door, which an avoidant person would, and instead went out and introduced himself to everyone.
That's lovely.
Yeah, a secure relationship is wonderful.
Mm-hmm.
Unfortunately, though, avoidant people tend to be attracted to anxious people and vice versa.
Say that
Whereas
again.
secure, yeah, I'll say it again. Unfortunately, the first two groups that are anxious and avoidant tend to be attracted to each other.
Okay.
And secure people, that 50% group, is attached to each other. So the question becomes, why am I in one of those first two groups? How did I get here? How do I get out?
Mm-hmm. All right. So I'm fascinated that there's going to be, just going back to the avoidant person who will get to a certain point and then they start sabotaging because there must be some panic that's going on that I don't know if I can take this to the next place because I might have to reveal more about me. And maybe if I reveal more, they may not like me as much.
Yeah, I think a fear of rejection is very much a part of why we withhold ourselves, can become aloof, distant.
Mm-hmm.
Even parents can be that way toward their children. I've had so many people in my office in our marriage ministry tell me they grew up without ever hearing the words, "I love you."
Wow.
From their parents, even though they'll tell me, I knew my parents loved me. They provided for me. They, took care of me. They gave me a home and, an education, and we took vacations. But for some reason, they could never say, I love you. And in some cases could never hug them.
What's your
Could never
response to that?
Well, that's too bad when that happens because you tend to grow up repeating that pattern.
Mm-hmm.
That if that's how you were raised, let me give you some characteristics of avoidance. We withhold, knowingly or unknowingly, our emotional availability and our transparency, letting people see more of who we are. Now, we can't go around, obviously, sharing all the deep things of ourselves with people we've just met or don't know if we can trust. But I'm talking over a long-term period of time where we just withhold making ourselves available. Somebody wants to hug you and you're stiff as a board, hugging in an appropriate way
Mm-hmm.
at an appropriate time. I've seen people as a pastor conducting funerals where no tears are shed, or very few. And when you try and express your sympathy to the other person, they just respond sort of on a head level, not a heart level. I think another characteristic is the inability to discern and care about other people's deepest needs. In other words, you just don't spend time thinking about what might be going on in someone's heart and what might be happening and why they, may need someone to reach out to them and to be of help to them and to care about them. I think another characteristic is this persistent inner feeling of distance from other people, distance from the people around us, our church, our congregation, our neighbors. It's kind of like we're on the outside of a house looking through the window at everybody else, connecting, having fun, enjoying one another, and we're sort of out in the backyard and we're just looking at life that way. I would go so far as to say I think some people live life as emotional strangers to everyone else. No one really knows who you are. No one really knows what you've been through. No one is allowed to really care about you because, again, you keep an arm's distance. And believe it or not, many spouses live their marriages that way. It's not just among friendships. In many marriages, people get married, but they never really give access to the other person's heart, to their own heart, to their spouse. And particularly if someone really desires a closer relationship, but you're so emotionally guarded. I think of a time when I did a marriage renewal service at a family camp during the summer up in the woods of Wisconsin. At the end of a week of talking about marriage, we decided to do a marriage vow. And one woman asked her husband if he would be willing to get in line and do the same. And he crossed his arms, said, absolutely not. He had a look of defiance on her face, and she cried for half an hour. And this was in front of other people.
Wow.
And you just wonder what was their marriage like?
Yeah. So she obviously felt heartbroken and probably some humiliation, and he held on to his defiance. So he was not connecting with her at her deepest needs. And that sounds so unfortunate and sad.
Well, it really is. I did at a funeral once of another individual who had one of these distant marriages and was distant from his kids. And the only picture he had that I could see in the living room was him and his dog. They were good friends, but he didn't connect with his adult children or grandchildren. No, loving your dog is just fine. I had several dogs and they've been one of my better friends. But when that's your only friend,
yeah,
and you have others in your life, that's sad.
Mm-hmm. And it's sad, Bob, that a lot of people prefer to live life as emotional strangers. I don't know if they consider that to be safer or more dangerous or what it is that puts them in that place. Or they might also say, I don't think people care about me. So they're not in a place to receive from people because they put up a wall.
Right. Well, usually those individuals, let's say they were taking a test that we often give people sort of for their emotional healthiness, they'd score very high on rejection. No doubt they were not loved in an emotionally close way growing up. Often they score a high on the hostility scales. Because when we have to keep everything inside of us, Bill, that's hurtful, and that will morph into anger. We will develop resentment towards the world, towards other people, possibly toward our family. We'll score high on inhibition, meaning that we'll just withdraw from situations when we have an opportunity. We'll score high on a quiet scale, meaning we never really say what's happening inside. And then we'll score high on the detachment scale, which is a sympathy scale, meaning we just do not have much feeling or sympathy for others around us. I had a man and his wife come to our office that were on the verge of a divorce. And he told me that when he was a boy, his mother almost died of something like meningitis or something close to that. They thought she would. And he said he remembers as a sixth grader saying, I will never feel this amount of pain again. I will never hurt this badly. Now, his mother fortunately lived, but he shut down. And in his married life, he was very aloof from his wife. He traveled, I think, in sales. And he said something that's kind of haunted me ever since I've heard it. He said, I live a life pretty much alone on the road, but I found that I make myself is good company. Like just me is good company. That's all I need is just to be with me. I can go through the day. So, and if it's just me, with a client and it's just me at a hotel room, if it's just me in the car for hundreds of miles, I'm fine because I make really good company.
Mm-hmm.
And I think on the one level, maybe there's, some resilience there. But I think really what he said is, I'm just keeping the vow I made as a sixth grader. And sadly, he and his wife did eventually divorce. And she did say that he had a problem with drinking. You see, people can say, I don't need anybody. I don't need relationships, but that's not true.
Mm-hmm.
God did not create us that way. And the pain that's down there, the loneliness, the emptiness, the isolation has to be medicated. And that's where a lot of people get into some very destructive and addictive behaviors. What they don't know is their real problem is loneliness. But they mask that, they hide that, in behaviors that kind of take that pain away momentarily.
Yeah, Bob, what about the vow that he made way back when? I'll never feel this much pain again. Vows like that, doesn't the enemy love when you make declarative statements like that? Because he thinks, well, I got an in now.
Yes, vows that are made out of pain,
Yeah,
rather than devotion or submission to our Lord, vows that are made of pain will lock up your heart.
yes.
And they will do all sorts of damage as time goes on, because it's basically bitterness. It's basically a vow, in bitterness, that I will never get hurt this way. I'll never allow anybody to get close to me. I'll never, ever do this or that. And when we're working with couples, we actually go one by one and break the vows with the Lord's help. We have to renounce them. We have to repent of them.
Because those
now, go ahead.
Those vows could start out of pure fear, couldn't it?
Well, and that's, something I want to talk about in this hour, is that I think underlying most of this is fear. I think the avoiding emotional intimacy is basically fear. And of course, the Bible tells us that we are, one of the commands Jesus gave over and over again was fear not, fear not, fear not. But to the avoidant person is fear more, fear more, fear more. Live in constant fear of what could happen.
Mm-hmm.
I remember reading a quote from a famous general who said, I have never made a decision based on fear that I did not regret.
Wow, that's good. Huh. All right, Bob, let me take a break. Dr. Bob Moeller is my guest. We're talking about different kinds of people as they struggle with emotional intimacy. Maybe you're anxious or avoidant, or maybe you're in the secure group and you enjoy and welcome close and lasting emotional relationships with other people. If you have a question, a comment, anything you'd like to ask Bob, let me know what it is. The text line is open, 877-933-2484. We'll be right back. You might be the kind of person that goes to Paris and still listens to Faith Radio on the app. And I'm thinking of a particular couple from northern Minnesota. Or you might be more like the person that just goes into the next room in your apartment and listens. Well, the good news is using the app is just as easy in both places. Downloading the free app is crazy easy. Just text the word app to 877-933-2484 and then click the link. And if you happen to be in Paris, there is a coffee shop, but you should see the prices of biscotti. They have gone through the roof. I recommend avoiding it. I'm back with Dr. Bob Moeller. Please go learn about him at forkeepsministries.com, FORKEEPMINISTRIES.com, forkeepsministries.com. We're talking today about emotional intimacy in important relationships, and maybe you're the anxious type and you're always nervous about the status of the relationships, or you just are avoidant. You just shy away. Or maybe you're one of the people that feel pretty secure. We're talking about that today. Bob, where do we take it from here?
Well, let's look for some possible causes of this.
Okay.
And there's some questions we should ask ourselves. Or if you're married to an emotionally avoidant person, or Here's some questions to just consider. When and where did I first learn to fear emotional intimacy? When and where do I remember looking back in my life that I thought it was better to back off, to hide, to dissolve into the background, to shut myself down as the man who made that inner vow did? When and where did that happen? Because I don't think we're born that way, Bill. I don't think that that's who we are. I think that's something that we learn. Number two, why have I established and maintained patterns of intimacy avoidance in my marriage or other important relationships? What purpose are they serving? Why am I doing this? Why do I maintain this? And number three, what drives me to want closer relationships, then find ways of sabotaging them or bringing them to an end? Why do I do this come here, go away routine? Come here, no, go away, and send those kinds of mixed messages. At one time in our nation's history, it was well over a century or more ago, John Rockefeller was the wealthiest man in America at the time. He started what was known as Standard Oil, which has gone through different types of acquisitions, but he was the first petro millionaire in the United States. And he once confessed, the richest man in America at the time, I want to be loved, I want to have friends, but I don't know how. And all the money that he had at his disposal simply could not buy him relationships and the connections that he longed for. Fortunately, there's a good ending to that story where he had an awakening in his life that it is better to give than to receive. And he showered millions of dollars on missions organizations and hospitals and universities and gave away a great deal of his wealth. And he was expected to die at 54 because he was, he had so many illnesses. He couldn't digest food. He lived on crackers and milk. At 54, you're richest man and you can't even eat. But when he discovered the joy of connecting with people, this is a true story, he lived to 64. He was expected to die at 54. Newspapers had written his obituaries, just waiting to print them. He lived to 64, and then he lived to 74, to everyone's amazement. And then he lived to 84. And he died at 94.
Wow.
Connecting with other people gave him 40 more years of life.
It's shocking.
That's just how valuable this really is and how important it is. Some possible answers of why have I become this way? Well, the three primary causes of avoidance that I have observed is number one, deprivation. We just don't know what intimacy, emotional looks like. We just did not experience it growing up. It just was not part of our family. I had some people visit me recently where during the engagement, the girl went to her fiance's home, sat down at the table, and there was a large group of relatives. And one of them says, the first thing I want you to know is we don't communicate in this family. And number two, we don't talk about our feelings.
Oh my.
That was her introduction to her future family. And as she said, they were telling her the truth. They made good on that. So we don't know what it looks like. Number two, we just become so self-focused in our pain. All we can think about is the hurts, the way people have treated us, the disappointments we've known in life, the ways in which we thought we were somebody's friend and then they turned on us, whatever it might be. But it leads to a self-focus where I'm just thinking about how to protect me. But the third, and I think you correctly identified it earlier, is fear. I have developed a fear of appearing weak, losing control of my emotions, risking vulnerability and possible humiliation, opening myself to the pain of rejection, or reliving past shame. And, once we've experienced any of those, we can develop a fear of ever experiencing them again. And if our fears are not identified and conquered, I will remain a prisoner of them for life, which would be terribly sad. I, as a pastor, spent a lot of time in nursing homes visiting, elderly and those, maybe with early dementia, whatever. But I spent my fair share in time in nursing homes. And I noticed, Bill, an interesting thing that some rooms were filled with pictures, drawings, things that obviously young children had made, crafts, birthday cards. In other words, the room was just filled with people expressing their love for this aging person, grandmother, grandfather. And you'd go into other rooms and it would be absolutely bare. It'd be the four walls, the window shade, maybe something, a desk, a clock, and that was it. And it caused me to begin to wonder, how did the person with a room full of cards and pictures get there? And how did the person with nothing there get there? Well, sometimes it's terribly unfair. And I mean, just because a room is empty doesn't mean someone wasn't a giving or caring person. But more often than not, it meant that they just invested in something other than the people around them. As a believer in the church family, as a husband or wife, as a parent, they just were aloof and distant. And at the end of their life, they got their wish. They wanted to be left alone, and finally they were. And I always found that very heartbreaking and a lesson. And believe me, I walked away with a lesson from that. I call it the 50-year rule, which is, if I have a task to do or a relationship to nurture or attend to, whether it be my wife or my grown children or my grandchildren, unless it's a dire necessity, which will I give that available hour, 2 hours, or morning to? Will I give it to the task that will further some life goals, or will I give it to the people that really make life worthwhile at the end of the day? I call it the 50-year rule. 50 years from now, how will I look back about the decisions I made, how to spend this day?
Mm-hmm.
And it's an awfully good guide.
It is good. Keep the big picture in mind, Bob.
Yeah, it is, because no one, as they say, has come to the end of their life and said, I wish I had spent more time at the office.
So true.
But do I wish I could have spent more time with my children and my grandchildren and others around me? Well, separate question. So step 3 in this, the next thing I would suggest is we ought to consider what happens if we never change, because direction is destiny. The way that we're living today, the patterns we're establishing, is going to determine where we end up tomorrow. And I have 5 things that I've put down will happen if I remain avoidant the rest of my life. Number 1, I will likely remain emotionally aloof by constantly finding fault with my spouse and with others to maintain my distance. In other words, we just find fault with other people and those around us because somehow inwardly we can justify then keeping away from them or not getting too involved with them because, they're human. It's a true story. I was in a church once where the church treasurer followed me around on Sunday mornings before I would preach. And he would, in those days, we didn't have cell phones and all this digital ways of paying things. So this was, another geological era where we still had phone bills that came in a paper listing all the long distance calls we made. He followed me around on Sundays before I was going to the pulpit, asked me why I called Des Moines and who was it? And why did I talk that long? And I mean, This is just before I'm, rehearsing my notes and ready to step in the pulpit. And this went on for weeks, months, different issues. Finally, I had to meet with him and ask him to stop this. I'll be accountable for how we spend the church's money, but I don't think I should have to answer on Sunday morning why I made a long distance call, to Iowa or somewhere else. Finally, we got another deacon involved because the tension between us was growing. And in the middle of that confrontation, out of the blue, he broke down in tears and he said, in 30 years, my wife has never said she loved me.
Oh, no.
And he started sobbing.
Wow.
And I'm a little astonished because I have the phone bill in front of me and I thought that was the agenda item. And we even have another deacon there to serve as a mediator. And he just wept. You see, it dawned on me finally, he followed me around because he wanted my attention. He followed me around because he didn't know how to ask for help with his pain.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing he knew how to do was criticize. And that's the way he'd been raised. And that's what's going to happen to us if we continue. Another probability is I will pursue, as a single person, romantic relationships only to abandon them when the thrill of the chase is over, or when they actually begin to respond to me.
Mm-hmm.
I will immediately find a way. I have talked to singles who have broken off 3 engagements in their life, and wondering why things just never work out. Well, maybe the first time it was the other person's fault. Maybe the second time it was just a run of bad luck. But at the third time, you're becoming the common denominator in all of these failed relationships. Number 3, I may pass this emotionally avoidant pattern on to my children.
Bob,
and that's very tragic.
I love this point. Can we hit pause there? Because I want to make sure we give enough time to cover these last 3. So let's just take a short break. Dr. Bob Moeller is my guest. We're talking about people. It could be you, could be me, could be Wyatt. Just when you have situations and certain tendencies where you're avoiding emotional intimacy in important relationships. Probably happens to all of us at some point. So we're trying to do a little bit of a breakdown of the types of people that do it. And if you have a question or comment about what we're discussing, you can text it over 877-933-2484. With Dr. Bob Moeller, talking about emotional intimacy, and we're talking about what you consider might happen to you if you never change. And I think right before the break, Bob, you were talking about, I will pass this emotionally avoidant pattern on to my children.
I'm afraid so. Children live what they learn what they live. And if they never have parents that truly accept them, care about them, interact with them, spend time, speak to their heart, that child is going to grow up thinking, this kind of distance, aloofness, detachment, that's normal. That's how you do life. And that's sad if that's the legacy that you leave to somebody.
Mm-hmm.
And I think another result will be that we tend to start focusing on our own personal autonomy. By that, I mean, we substitute relationships for career, pleasure, excitement, thrill-seeking, addictions of different things, because it's not like we can do without this. It's not like some people were born with a need for close friendships and relationships and others just aren't. We all are. It's just that some people are willing to be open and take the risks that are involved. I always kind of smile when Cheryl and I have worked with singles for many, many decades now, and we've been asked this question more than once. Bob, I want to fall in love with someone, but how can I find love without risk? And I have to smile and say, you know what? There is no love without risk. Not love worthy of the name. Now, don't be foolish, don't be reckless, don't be naive, and avoid, clear warning signs. But the point of it is, to be accepted, you have to risk being rejected. I mean, there's just no other way that that's going to work. I remember the first time when Cheryl and I were dating, and we were becoming more of an item. I remember the first night, beautiful spring night in Kentucky, early spring blossoms on the trees, a gorgeous evening, had a wonderful dinner, taking her home to her dorm. And I looked at her and I said, and I summoned the courage to say, "May I kiss you goodnight?" And with those beautiful brown eyes and smile, she said, "No, no, no."
Maybe
Well,
maybe you shouldn't have taken her to Burger King.
Yeah, right. I was starting to look at the bill from a different perspective. But no, you know what? There is no love without risk.
Sure.
And so anyone out there today, your fear of risk, there's real risks. But at the other end of the story is real fulfillment, real joy, real lasting satisfaction in life by taking risks. That's what's required. I think what also happens is someone, if they don't change, will be filled with the envy of others who enjoy fulfilling relationships. They may not admit it, but they are envious of people who have fulfilling and enjoyable relationships and close relationships. And it's hard to live your life with envy. The scriptures say envy rots our bones. And it's just this sort of inner pain or disease, if you want to call it, that only grows. But if I can, I'd like to pivot about what do we do about this? How can we move from avoidant or anxious into secure relationships? Because I think the scriptures offer us hope in this regard. One of the things that I recommend is that we study the life of Christ. He was someone who enjoyed deep and meaningful relationships with other people. You cannot read about the disciples and the 12, and particularly the 3, Peter, James, and John, that were with him for 3 years. How he waded into crowds to heal the sick and open the eyes of the blind, how he went to weddings and celebrated the new life of a couple together, changing water into wine, how he went to funerals and wept over people that had died and gave the dead back to their relatives, a dead son, an only son, back to his mother. You cannot look at his life and say that he avoided being hurt. He avoided being rejected. He avoided the risk of loving others. No, our Lord Jesus threw himself into life and cared for people that no one else cared for. I mean, at one point it says he was dining at the home of Simon the leper. Well, lepers were supposed to shout unclean and were supposed to keep their distance from everyone. And Jesus is eating at this man's home. I could go on for the time we have left, but I won't. But study the scriptures and see that the heart of our Lord Jesus was to connect with people and to care about their needs and to express his deep love for them and to welcome them into his life. Zacchaeus, Mary Magdalene, the woman at the well, Simon the Zealot. You look at all these people on the fringes of a society, and Jesus welcomed them into a loving and close relationship. Even as he hung on the cross in excruciating pain that we cannot imagine, he looked down at Mary, his mother, and John, his disciple, and said, "Now, John, this is now your mother. And Mary, this is your son, and you take care of my mother from now on." Even as he hung on the cross, his thought was for the needs and the concerns of the people that he loved the most. I love the way John describes himself in the gospel the disciple that Jesus loved. What a beautiful statement of our Lord. And so I think our faith, Bill, can take us a long way into overcoming this fear of intimacy.
Yeah, I agree. Indeed. So we need to obviously trust, and we need to let God do his work.
Yes, there's two aspects of the Christian life that you can boil it down to two things. Our part in the Christian life is to trust, to believe. God's part is to work. In other words, we can trust him to do the work if we are willing to surrender and trust him with our fears, trust him with our painful memories, trust him with a bad pattern that we saw growing up. That if we're willing to trust him and turn these things over to him, give them over to him, surrender to them, our part is basically done, because his part is to fulfill, is to work in us, to do the things that we cannot do for ourselves, that he will do. Now, God can work, but he's not going to work unless we trust him. He's not going to work unless we surrender. He's not going to work in our lives unless we give these things over to him. But if we do, now all the obligation is on his side of the tennis court, to work in us, to empower us, to heal us, to motivate us, to live his life through us. And so this really isn't as complicated as it might sound. I'm not sure it takes years of therapy and whatever. There can be some value in counsel, of course. But I think that we can unwind a lot of this by just saying, Lord, I trust you. I turn over to you everything that has bothered me, that has locked me down, that has driven me away from people, that has shut my heart off. I want to trust all of this, give it over to you. And I will just rest in your promise that you will be the one who both wills and gives us the ability to do these things, and that you will become our life and live your life through us. I mean, what if you were to say today, Lord, I have been distant from my spouse, from my children, from the people who really long to be closer to me. I ask your forgiveness for that, and I entrust me. I entrust my fears. I entrust my past experiences, my lack of role models. I entrust all that to you. If you will work, and all your promises will be fulfilled in me. So I think that simple exchange of giving over all of our anxieties, our anxiousness, and our avoidance, and receiving his security, receiving from him the confidence that we are loved and that we can share that love with other people.
Oh, what a great...
We may have talked about this on another program, Bill, but have you ever, I don't think I've heard many sermons preached on Romans 16, which is the last chapter of Romans, in which it is a list, a telephone directory, a contact list of all the people that Paul loved and cared about and was greeting.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
Consider that for a moment. 15 chapters about the great doctrines of salvation by faith and how to live that out, all these great Magna Carta of the Christian life. But the last chapter is greet this person. Please tell this person how much I love them. They're like a mother to me. Please greet this brother. Yeah, Paul was not just a doctrine machine.
It's the best. Dr. Bob Moeller is my guest. We're going to take a little break and be right back, continuing our discussion on intimacy. Be right back. Hi there and welcome. If you are a new listener, we want to officially welcome you with a free welcome packet gift. Request yours today at myfaithradio.com. I'm back with Dr. Bob Moeller, and we're talking about emotional intimacy. So, Bob, let's say that we're a secure person, So how would we enjoy our new life as a secure person in the Lord?
Well, we need to ask Jesus to create a longing in our heart for deeper relationships with the others. That's a worthy prayer. Create a longing in my heart for deeper relationships with other people. And what he will do is bring opportunities into your life for that to happen. They may be in disguise to begin with, but he will bring opportunities to have deeper relationships and emotional intimacy with others, and welcome those into your life. Anticipate those. Be ready for that. One of the things that I try and do on a daily basis is listen to the Holy Spirit and allow him to interrupt my schedule, to interrupt what I'm doing, to help me notice someone that needs to be noticed or cared about. Wherever we are, there are people around us with broken hearts, who have failing health concerns, who have all sorts of issues. And ask the Holy Spirit, enjoy the opportunity each day to be available. And what I try and do, and I just pass this on as an encouragement, is even if you don't know the person that well, but you have a conversation and you begin to learn of a need they have or something they're struggling with, stop right there and say, can I pray with you? Not I'll pray for you someday and, whatever. Most of us forget those promises. But right there, pray for somebody. And I would say almost every day, you will have interactions with people, and some you don't. Many you do know. And they'll surface a need or a problem or an upcoming crisis or something. Stop and say, can I pray for you right now? And it doesn't have to be long or eloquent or, King James, Elizabethan English, as beautiful as that is. You can just simply pray for them on the spot right there. And I have found that God uses that to touch the hearts of people.
Yeah.
Number two, start by trying to make at least one emotional connection with someone every day, by saying thank you, or by saying, and when you're asking, how are you doing, really meaning it. Listening. I don't think there is a better way to establish emotional connections with people than to listen to them. And as soon as you begin listening, people realize that and they start talking. I say another way would be to embrace the imperfections in others.
Yeah.
In the past, we used imperfections to shove people away, but now here's an opportunity to extend grace. Here is an opportunity to give a most surprising response to someone, as imperfect and as difficult as they may be. But start looking at that as I've learned, when hurting people hurt people. And if people are difficult or whatever, there's reasons underneath that. And to ask God for the grace to begin caring about that. And that will begin establishing a connection with that person.
That's awesome. I love these these ways to start a new life and to initiate and try to find those emotional connections. It doesn't have to be anything particularly special. Just it could be eye contact or a smile or a nice word to someone. You do create a little emotional connection.
Absolutely. One day I was standing in line getting a prescription at Walmart, and it was after Easter. And I just asked the woman who was ringing out my prescription, how was your Easter? And I could see her face turn from kind of okay to very sad.
Oh.
And I said, was it a difficult Easter? And she said, sometimes the children we love so much turn out very different than what we thought they would.
Boy.
And it was just, a 3-minute interaction.
Yeah.
But I wanted her to know I cared.
Yeah. Bob, as always, awesome time with you today. Thank you for the teaching on this. I will enjoy hearing it again. But thank you so much for being on the show today.
Well, thank you for the opportunity.
You bet. Dr. Bob Moeller has been my guest. Go learn more about him at 4keepsministries.com. That's FOR, Keeps Ministries, forkeepsministries.com. That wraps up our show for the day and for the week. Thank you for supporting Faith Radio. See you next week. Thanks for listening. Programming like this is made available through your support. Information available at myfaithradio.com.